The Scalper Pandemic continues unabated. Tech YouTube finds itself rent asunder, stuck in their usual routine of making PC build videos and component reviews that serve only to frustrate and alienate their audience. This fundamental shift has driven many YouTubers to diversify their content, focusing on vlogs, live streams, and valet services for some reason. Others, for whom the cutting edge of modern PC tech is something that happens to other people, carry on regardless. As for me, well, as I sit at home staring at the pile of PCs as yet unbuilt and reflecting that this perhaps wasn't the best time to start a PC channel, my thoughts turn to my trusty laptop. In the spirit of making do with what you've got in times of scarcity, here's a video about my 2017 Dell XPS 15. Honestly, I never really liked laptops much. I follow their development closely enough, I like to keep an eye on the tech, but I can't really convince myself that I can get work done in environments filled with chaos and distractions. And the idea of gaming in a public place, where people can see how badly I suck, makes me break out in a cold sweat. However, I'm a proud, dyed-in-the-wool deal hunter, and I can convince myself that just about anything's a good investment if the price is right. So it was that one fateful afternoon in 2019, I was browsing the computer section of my local cash generator when an unexpectedly high-end laptop caught my eye. It was a Dell XPS 9560 on sale for just £550. I could scarcely get my wallet out fast enough. Brand new, this laptop would have retailed at about 2k, and even used, with some scuffs around the edges, could have easily been resold for more than double what I'd paid. However, I couldn't bring myself to part with such a good-looking, powerful PC. And the more I used it, the more it wore down my defences. Like an adorable puppy that taught the movie's curmudgeonly protagonist how to live, laugh and love, the XPS changed my mind about laptops. For the most part. Over the last 2 years of ownership, I've failed to convince myself that newer 6 and 8 core laptops with GTX 1650s and 1660s were worth the substantial outlay to upgrade to. I've even begun to work around my near pathological need for complete focus, and for some less serious work tasks, those being script writing in Google Docs, light video editing in Resolve, moderate-sized Photoshop projects, and importing and exporting RAW files to Lightroom, the 9560's been good enough for a long time. That being said, every now and again something pops up on my radar that suggests, hey, maybe you want to sell your bargain-priced workstation and get this shiny new thing instead. That's why I'm making this video. It's a reminder to myself of why this laptop's still so great 4 years after its release. In the least relevant use case I could come up with, gaming. So, a quick tour of the laptop before the benchmarks. This is a Dell XPS 15 model 9560 from 2017. The second revision based on this influential chassis design, featuring the then still quite high-end quad-core Intel i7 7700HQ, 32GB of DDR4 2400, a 1TB NVMe SSD, a discrete GTX 1050 GPU, and a rather fancy Infinity Edge 4K touchscreen. Still the only 4K display in my home. The keyboard is average, unremarkable for a slimline design, but certainly nowhere near as bad as it could have been. The trackpad is frankly awesome, and I rarely find myself resorting to an external mouse in daily use. The array of ports is pretty solid, though the Thunderbolt 3 port has only 2 lanes of PCI Express, meaning external GPUs will probably be wasted on it. Aside from the vinyl skin, replacing the DC socket after an accident, repasting the CPU and GPU, and replacing the battery a few months ago, I haven't really done anything in the way of upgrades since acquiring it. There's a hot pixel that bothers me every time I boot up the laptop. That's been there for as long as I've owned it, and is probably the reason the previous owner sold it. But usually I forget about it after a few minutes, and it's certainly not worth the time and money needed to replace it. I don't have much in the way of meaningful productivity benchmarks. Photoshop works well enough, even my larger files with tons of smart objects and adjustment layers haven't caused the XPS to quit on me yet. In DaVinci Resolve, I tend to transcode my video footage before working on it, and once that's done, playback tends to be fairly smooth and scrubbing through timelines is largely unproblematic. For those who are curious about such things, here's a quick look at the CPU-Z, Cinebench R20 and R23 scores. Also, just to help keep track of my future benchmarks, I got a TimeSpy CPU score over 3900 and a GPU score of 1690, resulting in a combined score of 1847. Now, onto the games. They say nothing ever truly dies on the internet, and this is particularly true of GTA 5. 6 years on, and it's not quite at the bleeding edge anymore, though it can still be a bit much for my plucky little Dell to handle. With settings at mostly very high, we don't quite reach 60 FPS, and 1% lows even drop as far as the mid-20s. For the most part, I find this pretty acceptable, though dropping some of the more extreme quality settings a little would keep things coasting along over 60. For some reason, the accepted way of playing Fortnite is at minimum quality settings, but with view distance maxed. As far as I know, this doesn't affect how far out other players are rendered, but what do I know? Still, at the euphemistically named Pro settings, we get a pretty smooth 92 average and 55 1% low. Out of curiosity, I did a run at Epic settings, which meant for a pretty painful 34 FPS average. Warzone at low settings worked out surprisingly well, coming in a shade under 50 FPS average without touching the resolution scaler. Now, I'm not a fan of having to drop resolution in battle royales, given how they tend to usually descend into sniper battles, so this is probably about as low as I'd go. On the other hand, Valorant is surprising no one. You can play this game on practically anything. 1080 high came in at over 100 FPS average, and if I were inclined to plug this into my 144Hz monitor, I'm pretty sure I could get there just by dropping a few settings. I went on a bit of a shopping spree after Christmas and picked up Horizon Zero Dawn in the Epic Store sale, but as I've spent most of my spare time benchmarking stuff, I haven't really had a chance to play it yet. At this early stage of the game, I'm seeing frame rates in the high 20s while playing at 1080 original settings, which I take to mean being equivalent to a PS4. So far I haven't had much of an issue with gameplay at even these pretty low frame rates. Likewise, Cyberpunk isn't a smooth experience at a 25 FPS average, but more playable than some of my recent misadventures, and probably still better than playing on an Xbox One. Dropping down to 720 dramatically improves things, pushing my averages over 60, but sacrificing a little bit of the game's wow factor. I actually ostensibly bought a new motherboard just because it came with a free key for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I absolutely loved the last two games in the series. Unfortunately, it's sort of joined Horizon on the back burner, so I just used the built-in benchmark rather than wade through presumably hours of intro cutscenes to get to some representative gameplay sections. 1080 medium pushed averages just above 30. One of the reasons I don't get time to play new games is that I've only gone and got myself addicted to Rocket League again. At 1080 high settings, we're seeing over 100 FPS most of the time, and those sub 40 dips are mostly during goal explosions or when players leave the game. I wanted to end this video on a more positive note, but during testing I've realised something. Despite its aesthetic charms and great value, I'm ultimately not happy with my 9560. Performance is disappointingly uneven, running in the balanced power profile. CPU clocks tend to limit themselves even when plugged into mains power. Changing the profile to performance improves clocks, but results in the fans running almost perpetually, even under light loads. Furthermore, a known bug with this series of laptops means the i7-7700HQ occasionally gets stuck at 800 MHz and runs like a Celeron. This can be temporarily fixed using a throttle stop, or more permanently by disconnecting the battery and letting the BIOS reset. But this brings up the big problem with buying used. This laptop has essentially no warranty, and any repairs beyond my own rudimentary skill set will cost an obscene amount of money. Alas, there doesn't seem to be any solution that I can afford just yet, so I guess I'm stuck with my skinny, pretty, smart, relatively fast laptop until something better comes along. Poor old me. If you enjoyed the video, check out some of my other content, maybe donate to my Patreon so I can upgrade. Kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.